Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we have on a very special guest. Please say hello to the Atlantean Alchemist.
Hi everyone.
Hi, so today we're talking a lot about demons. We're going to touch on angels a little bit, but the main focus today is going to be demons. So I hope everyone enjoys it. So my first question is, how did you first get into working with demons, and what do you think was the catalyst?
Um, where it first began, I met a friend that I actually knew online 2 years before. We were in the same group chat, and we met 2 years later in the same college, in the same drama or arts class together. And it was like a huge synchronicity thing. And when we caught up, she introduced me into the world of working with demons and kind of began to help me change my perspective a little bit. And that's where I began to get my curiosity from. Um, and then it was sometime after where I came back into revisiting the topics again with a renewed interest. And then I did a lot of personal study, and it really started all with Dantelion.
So what major realizations did you come to when you first started working with them? And have there been any who have been like a more major part of your path than others, and what they've taught you?
So what I had to kind of learn with Dantelion and Hegenti, who were like the first two Goetic spirits I ever worked with, um, they brought through this. I kind of learned immediately, kind of working with their energy and stuff like that, that I began to see that there wasn't anything like malicious in their energy. There, I began
Mhm.
to see that their darkness felt more like comfort. It felt kind of like if you had lit a bunch of candles in your space and you had wrapped yourself up in a blanket in the night and you're reading a good book, that kind of warmth of the night. Or like if you're going out into to like nightlife city and the drive to going into the city in the night, that kind of rush of like security that you feel in the night, that's kind of what their energy feels like. And it was very reassuring. This was right before I had the big realization where I saw that um, darkness and light didn't equate to good and evil. But that came much later on. The
Yeah.
first feeling that kind of helped me to want to connect with them was understanding that what their darkness felt like.
Yeah. I feel that a lot because I remember like before I started getting more into left-hand path stuff, like I used to be scared of Hecate because I was like, "Oh, darkness, that's so scary." Um, and then you like start working with them with like demons or any kind of dark spirits or deities or whatever, and your perception of it is completely shifted. And it's so interesting to like kind of realize where those perceptions came from. I remember we were talking the other day about how media kind of contributes to it, um, and how like often the bad guy is shown as like wearing black and kind of this dark figure, even though that's not necessarily always the case. Like anyone can be bad regardless of what path they're on or what kind of spirit they are. Like when you really start to get into it, it really makes no sense, the whole classification with dark and light versus good and evil. Same with like black magic and white magic. And I know there's like other issues with those terms too. Um, but definitely working with demons is so eye opening.
It really has been.
Yeah,
It was.
absolutely. So I know you've mentioned before that you're starting to work with the Grigori or the Watchers. You have a video up now. I'll try to link it below. Hopefully I'll remember to do that when I'm editing. How does working with them compare to working with like other kinds of spirits or deities or demons or angels you've worked with?
It's very interesting because some of the Goetic spirits give me the same vibes as the Grigori. Um, the ones who I've seen it most properly is like Vapula or Barb. Um, both of them give me this vibe of this sort of like balanced energy, like there was some sort of origination with light and then taking on some darker attributes. That's a common theme you notice with the Grigori, where um, some of them may be darker than others, but they all have this lighter origin. You feel it in their energy that they don't feel entirely one way or another. They're somewhere in between,
Hmm.
which helps me to connect with them because as a great witch, I feel like they have this balance that I can connect with and attribute to them. In terms of, I feel that they're very close with the infernal divine and all those who are in those realms. I feel like some of them still have some connections to their angelic lives where they have maybe people that they knew that were very precious to them that may still be of the angelic realm. They still have some ties there, but they're kind of their own like entity. They're just kind of like, we're here, but we're just with everyone.
Hmm. Yeah, that's super fascinating. Um, and it's really interesting, like looking into their stories and stuff like that. They seem to be such powerful energies to work with. So like I'm excited to see how this like continues.
Yeah, as I go further with the series, I'll be talking about them individually.
Mhm.
One thing I have to say is a lot of them, they're very independent. They're very self-sufficient and kind of their own governing bodies individually on their own. And I think that's why the demonic divine love them so much and they get along so well is because everyone there is more individualistic
Mhm.
versus the angelic realm, the celestial plane is more unity based, where it's kind of like everyone is kind of rooting for each other. There's sort of like this cog in the machine kind of thing going on
Yeah.
a little bit. But with them, it's kind of like, they've kind of stepped back and they're just like, okay, this is who I am now. And
Mhm.
like, keen sense of what their identity is.
Yeah. Would you say it's important to have like when it comes to within our lives, would you say it's important to have both of those aspects where if you're too much of a cog in the machine, you get lost and you start to believe things without that aren't your own beliefs, if that makes sense, and you start to just be for other people and not yourself. But
Mm.
if you're too individualistic, then you're not connected to your community and stuff. So would you say that that could be almost like they both have those lessons to teach us and it's beneficial to balance the two as a
Yeah.
great witch?
Um, think of it like this, that if we are so focused on ourselves and cultivating our sense of identity, we're we lose the awareness that things around us impact us. So, for example, the events that are going on every day with the pandemic and all these um, issues of social justice, we're impacted by those events. They affect us emotionally, even if we're not directly involved. We're affected by it. If our anxiety spikes up, if our mental health declines, we're affected by even just environment, even weather. If you think about it, so to lose touch with what's affecting us in the ecosystem, um, it makes us less compassionate for others and it dims our ability to understand other people and their own divinity. Um, and in a way, it keeps you from the awareness of like how you can connect with other people and where you stand in the entire ecosystem. Because if everything revolves around you, what do you? There's nothing to understand. There's nothing to gain. There's nothing like there's no partnership,
Yeah.
and something that's really important. When it comes to the other side of things, if you're too centered on other people and very selfless, almost martyrdom and self-sacrifice, you end up losing your sense of self. You don't know who you are, what it is that you want, and what you need anymore because you're so focused on giving to other people. Um, and it could also be too where you start seeing red flags and you want to see the good in people so much that you block that out and you can't really turn back, and you're just like, oh, they did this wrong, but then you start having this perception that the ends justify the means.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with that. It's really important, I think, that this discussion, I don't think it's talked enough. I don't think we talk enough about the lack of balance that people can have and how important it is to work on that balance. Because we often go to extremes where we're like, okay, I'm I'm a god, but I'm like the most important. Everything revolves around me, or like, oh yeah, I'm not important. It's only the whole, the parts of the whole don't really matter. When it's literally, even in the Kabbalah, like it's literally both are just as important, and you have to stay balanced within both of those things.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think
yeah.
I don't know what it teaches too. Like from my studies with the Kabbalah, um, between the tree of life and the cliff hop, you learn these two different dynamics, these two different paths. And I think integrating both is important because you understand your place in the multiverse, and then the other one allows you to understand yourself and your own power in the multiverse. And I think those are kind of the realizations that come with working with those path workings that have helped me a lot as well. And it's a continuous, like, you could honestly do this for the rest of your life, going down just that bit of route of looking at the tree of life and that cliff off. But it opens a lot of doors and a lot of realizations around this area.
Yeah, it's a study that you could definitely go on forever because there's always something else to uncover. There's so much complexity. Like I wouldn't say like I don't know enough about the tree of life yet to like make a video on it, for example, or to teach other people. But I looking at it, I'm starting to come to my own realizations, or where there have been realizations I've made in the past, they're kind of clicking when I look at it and I'm like, yeah, I always knew this was true, but I never knew how to put it into words or picture or like a solid concept.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's fun stuff. Um, okay, so my next question is, as someone who's worked with both demons and angels, what would you say the similarities or differences are? Would you say the lines get blurred at times, or would you say that there's a marked difference between their energies and how they interact and the lessons they teach you and just the beings in general?
Okay. With angels, what's interesting is people always think all angels are light oriented. The surprising thing is that there's dark angels. So like for example, Archangel Samael. Samael, he's talked a lot about in the Left Hand Path, as sort of this demon and this a consort to Lilith, Agrapat Malat, Ashraf Zenunim, Nama. Um, but he is also the ruling angel of Mars, and he is known as the poison of God. So he is sort of like the punisher of the angels. And there's angels of destruction. There's angels of the night. There's angels of solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, the black moon. So there's dark angels, but they're oriented towards the creator. So really the difference between angels and demons is that angels are focused on order. They're focused on structure and maintaining the rhythms and the worldly processions of like celestial bodies of events. They make sure things go as planned. Versus demons, they're more chaotic in nature, so they look to break things down and reinvent them. So they're more focused on breaking structures and things that don't serve and making something better from it. And in some cases, depending on the situation, they also have their destructive aspect just solely for that. Just as there's angels of destruction. Um, so the difference is really just one is about order and one is about dissolution. But they both kind of come back to the idea of each other if you really think about it, because one is firstly the breakdown, and then they build something back up. And then the other is going to maintain something, but they also have the capacity to break it down. So there's kind of like this cyclical thing going on between the two of them. And I know that there's some angels that are like, we start to get to more hybrid spirits where they're kind of like, the more that they evolve and become different things, they take on attributes of other stuff. So there's angels that are that have demonic aspects that are still in the celestial plane, and then vice versa. Like for example, Barbados. In his lore, we learn that he carries some of his virtues still from the angelic realm as, I believe, a of powers. Um, but he's of the infernal realm. So there's this kind of play on between each other, and some of the stories, like especially with the kings, a lot of them are fallen angels. So there is this kind of going back and forth. Some of them you will notice that are solely of the demonic divine, like Dantelion. Another one who comes up like Beelzebub. They're individuals that you could feel to their core they were never anything but what they are now. Um, and then there's other ones who surprise you, so like Belial. You can actually feel a very slight aspect of angelicness in him, but he decided to discard so much of his own light to embody more darkness. That's really what you feel more than anything else.
Yeah.
But you feel sort of like this dark winged angel kind of vibe from him. So it's a really weird way to explain, but it's kind of like there's almost no separation, but there is at the same time. I want to say that they actually work together in harmony instead of this feeling of like opposing dimensions or realms. Like we're kind of told between like light and darkness and like the battle between good and evil.
Yeah, again, we're constantly told that they're like battling each other rather than both parts of the same thing. Like life and death, it's a cycle. They're not opposing each other. It's just they are what they are.
Yeah.
In a sense. And actually, when you were talking about that, it made me think of, so there's this idea. So I haven't really worked with angels. I'm gonna be honest. I don't really know much about working with angels. So I've heard people say they tend to take the path of least resistance, where like you'll ask for something and they'll give it to you, but in a really abrupt way where you're like, okay, I didn't want you to do that, but you still technically get what you asked for. Would you say that's true for your experiences?
Yeah, I've heard a little bit of that
Mhm.
going on, especially with the TikTok. I know
Yeah.
that's been a discussion on there as well. Um, the thing is how you work with them is what matters.
Mhm.
Um, People are not working with them as a force of order and of preservation. So when you're asking for something or trying to work with them to manifest something specific, and you're being very general about it, um, they will toss over some things. And even though stuff looks like it's not related to the topic at hand, it usually is. So they don't touch other aspects of your life unless it's correlated and directly involved with the thing that you're trying to manifest. If it doesn't have correlation, they won't bother touching it unless you were talking about like wanting some sort of change in that area as well. So you have to be very specific with them. It's true that they aren't um, as compassionate in terms of like wanting to give it to you in a way that's gentle all the time because they're more about what your soul desires for evolution. They care more about like the grand master plan. So they're very much like the ends justify the means.
Mhm.
They will put you through it so that you get what you want, um, but in a way that it was worth it in the end. So for some people that's difficult. And I've heard some similar things with the demonic divine as well. I've like you hear of personal encounters where there's some dramatic change in someone's life. So I think it honestly goes both ways.
Yeah.
But the demonic divine are more understanding. They have, because they're more at our own level of personality and characteristics, so they understand our emotions, and so they can be more compassionate at times. Um, and I think when you're building a relationship with the infernal divine, your manifestations become more understood over time. Like if it's like you just came to someone, a stranger, and you're just like, okay, I want you to redirect, like completely redo my life. That person is going to tear down the walls on everything. But if it's someone that you know, they know how you think and how you feel, they're going to go a more gentle route. The angels, it's more difficult because you can't build an emotional connection with them as like strongly. They can come to understand you and your soul at like a higher level, but they're always up there in that higher level. They're always thinking of like what your higher self wants. They're not always thinking about what you yourself, your fleshly mortal self, want, because they're more concerned about like the bigger schemes and like how your decision of what you desire affects other people and the multiverse and the cosmos. So you have to look at angels like that. They're not thinking about what that one little, like they don't care about you wanting a Ferrari. They don't. They care more about the cosmic impact of you wanting that Ferrari on everyone else, and if it's something that's really correlating with your higher self. If it's not, they either won't help or there's going to be a lot of shifting going on. So that's the difference.
Okay, that was a great explanation, and it makes a lot more sense to me too. Because I think there's this conception that there's either like the idea that angels are nice and fluffy and like, I love you, kind of guardian angels with like cute little wings, or they're like horrible and mean and like oftentimes those conceptions on the internet about certain beings are never one of those. It's always something in the middle.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, which is why I think people need to be careful what they see on the internet, what they believe, because the internet almost always goes to extremes with a lot of things. And I was actually watching a Netflix documentary about social media. I won't get into it all now, but it does encourage extremism and polarization, and that includes even discourse about angels, demons, the fairies, whatever, like the whole nine yards. Okay, so actually, this next question kind of does go well with what we just talked about. What role have demons had in you unlearning the propaganda that society has taught you and in shifting your worldview?
um, I think it starts off with Christianity, because that was a big thing for me. So a big surprise, Christian, my name, was very Christian. I was very religious. Like I wore a cross all the time. Like I never even took it off. Like to to take a shower with it and everything. Um, and even now, I still do a Catholic prayer that specifically is just I do as respect to my ancestors. Not so much for me,
Mhm.
um, but it's focused on the guardian angel. Um, but it it took some time because even the way like I used to write a lot of poetry as well when I was younger, and it was very a lot of Christian themes. And I look back at it and I cringe, but um, like where this concept of like light is holy and good, um, and darkness is kind of like the depressive state, and that's kind of what was going on in my mind and kind of what good and evil was to me. I always thought darkness as more like the depressiveness of the mind and like um, the loss of like will and desire to take action in your life. I always looked at that as like a form of evil, as well as ignorance, or just because there was in that time period of my life there's a lot of bullying where like in traditional schools and stuff like that. So that kind of was like my mental process in the beginning, and then coming out from all that, um, I didn't grow up, thankfully, with the idea that you do this or that, you're gonna burn in damnation or whatever.
Oh yeah, because that's traumatizing.
I was very in. I was modern day Christian, so it was very much like concepts of forgiveness, being kind to one another. Um, the thing I think that took me away from it all was my sexuality, and that's where I moved off from. Um, and then also just learning other people's perceptions of like different forms of Christianity and monotheism, how it was really toxic. Um, and then learning how many people are not following their own religion, and then using it as an excuse to like bash other people.
Yeah.
That was a very big thing, a big no-no. Um, so with the demonic divine, especially with Dantelion, because even though I conscientiously was beginning to figure it out, Dantelion is a spirit who focuses on changing a person's mind and their heart. So to me, it's not like mind control. It's more like subtle influences.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? Um, when you watch a commercial and they're the subliminal messages of them,
Yeah.
his energy is very subliminal. So it took time. It took honestly about a year to unravel all that. Um, and like we talked before, it was social media that I really had to like be mindful of, and like media in general, where protagonists are in this limelight and shown as holy and good, and the antagonist is always some sort of dark, twisted figure.
Yeah.
With like video games and media, and that fed into it even more. So I have to be mindful of that sometimes. Granted, I think I still watch things that have that kind of theme.
Because you can't escape it sometimes, you know?
I just love the storyline so much. But
Yeah.
another thing he taught me, because of coming out of a situationship, um, he brought forward the awareness that I needed to be aware of what my own identity is, like outside the wants and needs of other people. Because I used to be very selfless. In the ways I still am, and at least I feel that it's more balanced now.
Mm-hmm.
Or it was to a toxic point of just constantly giving and draining yourself away.
Yeah.
From people, especially when they're not giving back, and that was the bigger problem. So he helped me to identify um, myself outside of relationships and look at my pros and cons and how I perceive myself, and who I want to become.
Yeah.
And I think that was what really helped me. And from that point onward, I started to think more about myself, not just in my self worth, but like in everyday. Like I always try and make sure I'm well taken care of before I take care of other people.
Yes, that's a really important thing. Like that they teach you. So for me, with my experiences with Lilith, the way I've been since before working with her versus after, like the difference is phenomenal because she's taught me to set boundaries. She's taught me, you don't have to be nice to everyone if they're invading your boundaries or if they're taking more and more and more and not giving and taking advantage of you. Like don't take bullshit basically. Um, versus like with Christianity where it's like turn the other cheek and you know um like do things for other people even if they're bad or good to you, it doesn't matter. In some ways I do think a little bit of a peaceful way of handling things isn't bad at all, but when taken to an extreme where people are using you as a doormat, then it gets so toxic. And it's something in our society, there's this idea that taking care of yourself or setting boundaries is selfish, or that you're like not as good of a person. Like people who don't do that, who don't set boundaries, people who give more they can take, are kind of glorified in a way, and they're like, "Oh, they're such a good person, like, oh my god, I wish I," and it's like, you don't wish you were like them, because I'm sure when they go home at night, they're not happy, because they never take care of themselves, they don't treat themselves well, everyone's taking advantage of that, and, the demonic divine doesn't doesn't want they don't stand for that, they're like, "No. No, you're not doing that. You're not." It's like the same concept as like in an airplane where they say put on your mask before helping someone else. It's the same thing because if you're depleted, how are you going to really be able to help others and be healthy and happy at the same time? So,
Yeah, that's like choking underwater and then pushing someone up to breathe for air. Like it doesn't make sense.
exactly. It makes absolutely no sense. And like with my experiences with Christianity, I remember I was kind of having a panic attack, and I was like, "What do people open the Bible and read it to feel better when they have a panic attack, right?" And I was like, "Okay, I'll do that." And I did, and I flipped to a page, and it said like all of the things that you would do that would make you go to hell, and it made my panic attack worse. And that was the moment where I was like, "Okay, this isn't my thing. This isn't for me." It was so bad. But like when it comes to the path that works for me now, which I'm sure like you and a lot of people can relate to, it's a lot it feels more right, like things just kind of click in place versus when you're on a path that isn't right for you personally. It always feels very wrong. There's always like this kind of um is not disease. I meant like uneasiness, but I meant like dis-ease, but not disease. So like there's a sense of uneasiness, I guess, when it comes to being on a path that isn't right for you.
Yeah, there's been a lot of demonstrations of that even in my own path. Like even with like paganism in general, like there are certain gods I thought I would end up with working with continuously and realizing they weren't for me. Um, it takes a lot of time, and even when you think you have it all figured out, some sort of third variable comes in and just knocks everything over.
Exactly. And that's why I'm very against proselytizing because it doesn't work. Because I go by the belief that whatever that people find their own path. So if someone's a Christian and that works for them, that's wonderful because that's their path that's meant for them. But if someone tries to force me to become a Christian, I'm not ever going to truly be a Christian because that's not my path. It's not what I'm meant to be doing. And like same with any other religion.
I think in a weird way, I've become a better person because of my path.
Mhm.
Like, when I got out of Christianity, I had a lot of resentment, in terms of like my relationship with God and stuff like that. But it was when I got into paganism and spirituality in general that that relationship was able to be healed, and I had a way different perspective of where I was then to where I am now. And sometimes you just need that perspective. Like can't really see the world from how it is then. Like sometimes you're just like, is this all there is to this? And then when you finally get into the rabbit hole of like spirituality and especially the left hand path, you realize, oh my god, there's so much to explore. Like I don't have enough time in the world to look at all of this.
That's so true. That's so relatable. That's the most relatable thing I've ever heard. Like, um, I felt that. I felt like all of what you said. Because after Christianity, I had that resentment too. I actually went through a hardcore atheist phase. I went through, the whole Christopher Hitchens and all of that. And then you find spirituality, and you're like, wait a minute, not like religion isn't inherently bad. Like it doesn't have to be toxic. It's just the way people like twist things. Um, and then like learning and learning more, and then the more you learn, you find more things to learn about. Like my book wish list is like there's so many. There's so many. I don't know how I'm gonna read all of those, but like it's so cool because life becomes so interesting when there's always something to explore.
Yeah, and another thought I had about it is like, in a way, what Christianity promotes and how you become that person and whatever. I feel like in a weird way, maybe not totally, but the things that it promotes, like being kind to one another and like forgiveness and stuff like that, I feel like I was able to actually achieve that getting
Yeah.
out of it. And I think about it a lot because of my first name. I like to look at the meaning behind my name. So, Christian means follower of Christ. And I'm just like, I'm like, I'm not a follower of anyone. But
Yeah.
I started looking at like the meaning behind it and I'm just like, maybe there is some component to this that actually is interwoven in my life somehow. Uh,
Mhm.
at least that's been my take.
Yeah, cause I think it's like a lot of the time, a lot of religions, it's just a different means of getting to the same place,
Mhm.
you know? Which is really cool that you mentioned that because, um, not everyone has the same path of getting there, but where we're going, it's like this, it's just like bettering ourselves. That's really it. Like it's not, well, I mean, it's more than that, but when you strip it down to its core, we're not all that different from each other when it comes to different like religions.
Mhm.
Okay. So what misconceptions around demons do you think are important to dispel, and how would you go about dispelling them?
One is that you don't need to have a whole ceremonial setup to contact them. I get so many questions about this, like how do I summon this? How do I invoke this? How do I evoke this? And the truth is that like just by saying their name, you're already getting their attention. It's just a matter of being very specific with the calling card. And I've talked about how like it's important to be very specific because if your calling card is very general, you're calling out to whatever, and some trickster spirits can show up. Um, but just having their N, and I like to say their N maybe like 2 or 3 times. Just doing that and then specifically saying, I ask that you be present in this space with me now,
Mhm.
that works 100% of the time. I don't need to have a whole like Solomon's ceremony
Yes.
with the whole mat underneath me, all kinds of like candles surrounding me, chanting kumbaya for like 10 days for maybe like a glimpse of vision. Like I don't have to go
Yeah.
through all just to make contact, and I think that's important, that it's a lot easier than one thinks. And even if you haven't built up the ability to sense those things, divination is always helpful, and that really was where I started, and it helped me tremendously. Um, besides the misconception of good and evil and light and darkness and dividing that, um, other misconceptions is to be aware that whatever you read on lore about spirits, take it with a grain of salt because it may not always be true. Like we talked about in the video we did together, like for example, Belial, like he is an individual and a spirit who you read his lore, it's like, oh, all he does is lie and he's very devastating and destructive. Um, but take that with a grain of salt. If you feel called to something, explore it, obviously with protections. I always put up some sort of protections for the first initial conversations. Maybe after like 3 visitations of having them enter into the space with you and just communicating with them,
Mhm.
get a feel for them, for their energies, profile them. I like to create lists and composite like what their abilities are, what their correspondences are, and kind of what they're like based off the responses. And you could even do this with tarot or whatever form of divination you have. Preferably not pendulum, but something that you can work past confirmation bias. Um, and this is kind of like what I would do when it comes to misconceptions because not all the lore is accurate. And I was talking about this before with Viv, where it's just kind of like, even within ceremonial magic, you may want to consider that maybe some of the lore that is on certain spirits written is based on those who were evoking them through Solomonic traditions, because this was the subjugation of those spirits. If you were chained and you were bound by someone to do a task for someone else, how would you react? How would you respond? Obviously, you'd be responding in accordance with what their desire is because you're in a position where you have no choice but that. But would you appear more nasty to that person? Would you be more curt um, or more spiteful? So you have to think of that when you're looking at the lore. Um, and it is, you have to really just see what resonates with you. I think that's the most important part, because not everything is going to resonate with someone else. Like, I've heard people who have negative experiences with Lilith, and I've seen people that are empowered and transformed by Lilith. And I don't think either is wrong. It just means that those people who don't need Lilith in their life, just that's not what their medicine is. It's not what's going to heal them or empower them at that time. She may come on later on as something empowering, or maybe not at all. It kind of depends on everyone's path, but I think that's where we have to draw the line with discernment and being very clear and looking past these misinterpretations.
Exactly. So you brought up a couple points that I want to address. So the first one, when you said you don't have to have a whole ceremonial setup to like contact, a demon, that was so true because the first time I contacted Lilith, literally all I did, I put her sigil on a candle, I carved it into a candle, I lit it, I sat down, and I meditated. That was really it. I think I said her N a couple times. So like you really don't have to like, I don't know, have a whole lot of tools and then do a whole thing and set it up for like an hour because I mean you can, but you don't have to. But you also mentioned like for some people might have bad experiences and some might not. And I just thought of like same with how we were talking about Christianity, how it's not for everyone, but it is for some people. Like for me, like for example, the Christian God, to me, I don't feel connected to him at all, and it always felt like the connection wasn't there. But to some people, they feel that connection, and to them, it's super strong. So, like again, it's like different people connect differently to different things. So not everyone has to connect with every single god, every single demon, every single angel, every single spirit out there because that's not necessary.
Yeah.
Um okay, and then what are some of your favorite books that you'd recommend on demons in the left-hand path and anything that we've really discussed here?
One of the ones I really like from S. Connolly is Demonic Pacts.
Mhm.
That one was really good if you're looking to make contracts with them, like to have a very specified goal and direct a relationship with them, um, and kind of what to expect. Because a lot of people, I get a lot of comments of people that are like, "Oh, can I like give my soul to like achieve
Yeah.
something?" And I'm just like, "No, you should really keep that." What you need to like have these conversations with them, kind of know what they want. Like one to I'm gonna be honest, this is one pact I did with Lilith. Not I don't have it going on anymore, but I was looking to do a pact with her to um maintain my beauty and like preserve it because I want to age well. So what she wanted was my coffee, my café con leche that I make in the morning, each full moon or something like that. Like something simple like that. And I was like, you like coffee? And I'm like, okay. So it's little things like that. It's not going to be a grandiose thing. It can be, but I think the stronger your relationship with them, the less demanding that they are, if that makes sense. Because you've cultivated that relationship and they're like, to some spirits that incense is enough because they have built that bond with you over time, versus you going to a stranger and asking for a Ferrari or whatever, like, or a harem. if you ask them for those things, um, they're going to ask for a lot back in return. Versus if you ask a friend or a lover or anything like that, they're going to be like, oh, okay, just an IOU is fine or whatever. Sometimes even in packs, you don't even have to give anything. It really depends on the relationship. So that's one book I would recommend, because it goes into that and like different types of pacts you can make. Um, Another book is Angels and Demons. Do not remember the name of the author off the top of my head, but he actually goes into the 72 angels of magic and the 72 goetic spirits and angels that correlate with those demons. So you could actually pair them up and work with both at the same time.
Interesting.
That one's really cool. I like that one a lot. And then there's also the Goetic Pathworking book. That one and the 72 Demons. Those are my three favorite resources. Um, when it comes to being able to look at what their abilities are, what they're all about, because a lot of people who can't channel or can't like receive the information of what their abilities are specifically, because it's not recorded. You have to use UPG.
Yeah.
So these books give a little bit more hindsight because I find them to be very accurate. Like you almost get either 100% or at least 80% of what they're capable of through looking at these three references. So I go back and forth between those three books when looking at their abilities and things like that. Another books, and then I do really like, even though I'm not a big fan of all of the works from Become a Living God, I really like their compendiums on specific spirits, because it's a conjointed work of multiple authors, and their own experiences and their own particular rituals. And even if you don't resonate with the rituals, they give a lot of really great information, or it would inspire your own rituals. So the Compendium of Belial and the Compendium of Lucifer are my two favorite. Um, but yeah, I think those are my recommendations, at least off the top of my head.
Okay. Thank you so much. Those sound really good. Also, I gotta check the ones of those that I haven't read. I'll put them in the description for everyone just so I'll try to, just so they can check them out as well. Um, okay, and do you have any like parting words or anything like you wanted to say before we go?
The only thing that comes to mind is a tweet that I made. So the tweet is that we are an average of the five people that we most connect with. So choose wisely the people that you surround yourself with, but this also includes spirits. So the five, you are the average of those five most influential beings that you surround yourself with. So choose wisely who you surround yourself with, who you want to embody, um, because they will influence you. You will transform by the presence of these spirits, just as you would by people. I think that's really the main focus that I want to leave you guys with.
Yes, fully agree with that. That's very wise. Okay, so I hope you all enjoyed that. This was a really interesting talk. It was really eye-opening. I learned a lot. I hope you guys learned a lot too. I'll put all the stuff in the description. Also, Christian and I have made a video on his channel, so if you haven't seen that, go check that out as well. And I'll try to put that in the description too. So I hope everyone has a wonderful day. I love you all. Blessed be. Bye.
Bye.